Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Falvo, Managing Director at Arcview Consulting. Thank you for joining our Arcview Access webinar today, where we'll be chatting about hiring highs and lows. As we begin, we also want to say a special thanks to our strategic alliance partners, all leaders and experts in the cannabis industry, providing you with great resources and services to support your success. They include the following: Alpha Root for seed to sale insurance, All Leaves, a cannabis POS made easy, Green Tank Technologies for vape insights and innovations, our data partner, Hoodie Analytics, Hunter and Esquire, our executive search and human capital advisory partner, PayQuick for banking and treasury services, and Waterton Partners for fractional CFO and full stack consulting. We greatly appreciate your services that support the industry and value you all as partners. So let's jump in. For those new here, this program is being recorded and will be available within a week on our replays page, where you can also find our entire library of programs. The chat is open, so feel free to introduce yourself and connect with other attendees. You can also ask questions, which we will try to answer along the way. Before we start, I'm going to share a quick rundown of the Arcview Group so all are up to speed and aware of the support available to all through our ecosystem. As I do a quick review, please take a few moments to complete the poll popping up on your screen, which will feed into part of our program today. Many of you know and have been part Whoops, hold on one second. Sorry, something popped up on my screen. I'm supposed to take the poll now. Many of you know and have been part of the Arcview community since it was started in 2010 by Troy Dayton and Steve D'Angelo. Their mission was to create a first of its kind and much needed platform to connect investors with entrepreneurs who were seeking capital, and always doing so with social justice at the core. We provide something for everyone, including always having a focus on providing investors with credible information so they can make sound investments in this tumultuous space. And for entrepreneurs, we want to help you understand how to best prepare to be a sound investment. Flash forward to today, and from that solid foundation, an entire ecosystem of services sprouted, each uniquely positioned to support this budding industry from the ground up. We have Arcview Ventures, our principal investing group, managing our unique collective fund made up of 78 members, where those members call the shots. Our Arcview consulting team, which I sit on, is your pathway to scaling and building your business no matter the size, from licensing all the way up to state expansion and valuations to prepare yourself for an exit. We can help you along the journey of your cannabis business. Arcview Events and Experience, powered by McVeigh Global Meetings and Events, is at the helm of our digital programs like today, and bringing the Arcview community back together for in-person events like New York City a few weeks ago and Miami coming up in December, and with many more coming in the new year. Another gem of Arcview is our Arcview's Women Inclusion Network, which I also run. This network brings amazing women in cannabis together to have open dialogue and honest conversations, and to have a way to arm women with the tools and connections that allow them to be the best they can be. We rally around the pillars that Arcview was founded upon: equal access in all areas, including access to plant medicine, connections to capital, and an overall support system that will help you grow as an individual and entrepreneur. Arcview Marketing Services is a new business unit in our ecosystem, and they provide a trusted and reasonably priced full range of services to move your branding, website, lead gen strategy, and CMO to go needs forward. Lastly, Arcview Capital, the first FINRA registered broker-dealer in cannabis, is here to handle your financial raise or investment needs. And they also just launched earlier this year crowdfunding platform and another offering, MJ REIT. And now I would like to introduce Brian Passman, co-founder and CEO of Hunter and Esquire, who will kick off the program today. Take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, Arcview. It's great to be here with you all and the Arcview audience. Hunter and Esquire is very happy to partner with the original broker-dealer in cannabis. I think we are the original retained executive search firm in cannabis, so that makes sense. And great that we're here to talk about human capital I'll share one of my favorite soapbox statements, which is that your human capital is typically your best appreciating asset. And I've always thought and continue to and will forever believe that the companies that treat their human capital with the same love and rigor and desire to attract and retain as they treat their financial capital are the companies that will win. If you think about, you know, what the cannabis industry is, it's a lot of highs, it's a lot of lows. There's really nothing very static about it. So this is a very appropriately named webinar, and recruiting is highs and lows, or any role in people operations, HR, or talent acquisition. So when you smash together the cannabis industry and the people operations aspect of it, I mean, really super high highs and very low lows, and a lot of weird in between. So I'm sure we'll cover some of that here. It's a difficult time right now in the space for a lot of people. We here stay tuned in to what's happening. We have a lot of friends that work in the space, that lead organizations in cannabis, and it's certainly a trying time, but we're a gritty bunch, and this industry is here to stay. So, you know, this will be another interesting time to see how things shake out and how the herd thins, and we'll see who is the most set up for success. I'm sure we'll talk about some of those essential skills. I won't get into it here, but I love the industry. I believe it's here to stay. I'm never doing anything else. It's great to be a part of this community, and I hope that everyone enjoys what we cover here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. We're looking forward to this chat. And with that said, I'd love for the other panelists to turn on your cameras and unmute yourself. And I'd love to introduce our moderator today, Danielle. She is the content manager at the Arcview Group. And we have Brian as well. He'll be a panelist. And then we have Savina Monet, Executive Director of Cannabis Workers Coalition, and Brittany Parker, co-founder and CEO of A Green Legacy. So with that said, Danielle, I'll let you kick it off and we'll start the panel.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to have all these thought leaders in our presence and talk about something really important, which is hiring. Now, this has a lot of perspective, so we hope to really cover a lot of bases today. But like we said, hop in that chat with the Q&A if you have questions. We want you to really take some stuff away today. So with that, my first question is for Brian. I wanted to ask you how you ended up filling a need for recruiting specifically in cannabis.
Yeah, so I'm a career headhunter. It's all I've ever done since graduating school. I did not aspire to be a recruiter, but fell into it as many recruiters do, and put in it was probably 18 or 19 years of search before we launched Hunter Esquire 5 years ago this week. And I talk about it as my destiny. Only ever being a recruiter, very long time, daily cannabis consumer. I've been training my whole life for this gig. And I guess it was around 2014. I took a look into starting a cannabis business with some people when I was in Florida, and it didn't work out. I went into recruiting for someone else's agency. I had previous experience in life science search, and went into food and beverage, consumer packaged goods, executive search, and spent about 2.5 years doing that, but always had this, you know, pull to work in legal weed, and had made a lot of friends through looking into standing something up previous in the industry, and just knew that the industry was going through in 2014, 15, 16, this evolution away from just the friends and family hiring to more of a recruit model. And I was trying to get a recruiter gig in the space, but there was not a retained executive search firm in cannabis. So I have a very entrepreneurial wife who eventually inspired me to start my own search firm along with her. She's the Esquire and Hunter and Esquire. So yeah, we took the leap 5 years ago this week, and I could definitely say it's been the most rewarding professional experience for me by miles.
Awesome. I love that. So I'm going to have you start this one off and then maybe you can kick it over to Brittany. But what is specifically different about recruiting for cannabis?
Whew. I mean, the cannabis industry is a startup industry, of course. And so for me, by way of that, every company in the industry is a startup. Some could be labeled as more of an established startup. And then you've got your, garage, ground floor, or basement level startup, and a lot of stuff in between. So really, it's just constantly vetting talent for being able to work in a very dysfunctional startup environment, which I think as a recruiter in other industries, you don't get across the board. You might have startup clients in a certain industry vertical, but it's not full-time, full spectrum around the clock recruiting people into a startup environment. And so with that comes a lot of, need to vet essential skills for working in startup life, such as grit and creativity and curiosity and passion and, and other things on top of all of the hard skills. But I think for us, the key in getting a lot of stickiness in our placements is building a lot of education into our recruitment. So, it's very different than working in CPG and recruiting someone from Coke to Pepsi, or working in retail and recruiting someone from, Gap to Abercrombie. There's a lot of education to give the candidates, especially as we enter more and more people from outside the industry in, and all the watch outs that come with working in cannabis, such as, how it's going to impact your ability to manage your personal finances. And if you're not a US citizen and thinking about pursuing that, you probably shouldn't work in a federally illicit industry before going down the road to gain your citizenship. And, so a lot of very unique and interesting educational topics to cover with candidates so that they don't find out after the fact. So I think that's really unique to recruiting in cannabis that you don't get elsewhere. And then just real quick on the other side is just a lot of the human capital advisory we get to do. I said it's been very rewarding for me because in the last 5 years, I've had significant more opportunity to advise hiring teams on talent attraction and retention and have that stick and see it implemented more so in the past 5 years than all of my previous years combined. So that is massively, incredibly rewarding.
Love to hear that. Brittany, anything to add about what's different about recruiting specifically in the cannabis space?
I think one thing that's very different is that I think a lot of people who are wanting to get into the cannabis industry, they feel as if they have to have a lot of cannabis experience, and that their skills that they have may not transfer directly. And that's not true. We know that that's not true. And so I think that that's one thing that is a lot different than other industries where, even if you have someone who's just graduating from college, they're just looking for a job wherever they can. So if they get a job in tech, they're like, oh, I got a tech job. That's awesome. And it seems attainable. But then when it comes to like, ooh, I don't know if I can apply to this cannabis job because I don't really know a whole lot about it. And the cannabis industry in and of itself there are a lot of aspects of it that are just like any other industry. There's a lot of things that are unique, a whole lot of things that are unique, but there are a lot of elements that are needed. The only pathway into cannabis isn't just like owning a dispensary or working at a dispensary. Like, we also need people with tech skills. We also need data analysts. We also need writers and creators. And we also need all of the things that the folks over at Google or at Amazon also need within their organizations.
Got it. That's really, really enlightening. And actually, maybe Savini, you can shed some light here. Do you think that people that consider themselves cannabis workers, they consider that their sector, kind of like a tech worker or a healthcare worker? Do you think that they invest themselves in that as a sector and as an identity, or that it's interchangeable?
No, I think a lot of people that work in cannabis, they just naturally identify with it. I also think that a lot of people are attracted to this industry because either they have some sort of prior experience with cannabis, or just some inherent passion for the medical qualities of it, or they've heard those transformation stories. So I see a lot of passion tied to the industry. And so a lot of people that want to identify with that. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to just slightly shift a little bit. Brittany, I was hoping you could talk a bit more about identifying the needs specifically for Black, Indigenous, and folks of color who are in cannabis and getting them the same representation and opportunities in all of the levels, executive level, entry level, breaking into cannabis. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there are quite a few things that we know about the cannabis industry right now. And one thing is that it is an overwhelmingly homogenous industry. And it's been like that at various different levels, from individual contributors all the way up to the C-suite into the executive level, and then also as it relates to boards within cannabis companies. And so a few things, it's 17 in 2017, 17% of executive positions, minorities were in those positions, only 17%. After that, so I want to say it was 2018, I wrote down here, 90% of people who were working in cannabis and they were in executive positions, they were white. What we also know is that 70% of top executives in the 14 largest cannabis companies, they're white men. And the thing about that is that it's not a conversation around like white versus Black or white men versus everyone else or any of that. Like, that's not the point. The point is that we know that that's not representative of the diversity that we have just in our society in general, but it's also not representative of the diversity within people who leverage the cannabis plant, who leverage it at all different levels. And we also know that when it comes to teams and when it comes to organizations that are diverse, that aren't so homogenous, they perform better. Like, it translates to dollars and cents. And so I think I actually had a metric here. Diverse companies actually attain 19% higher revenue than homogenous ones. And that's due to innovation, because you get so much more diversity in people's experiences when you have people from different cultures, different racial backgrounds, different socioeconomic levels. You get so much more, so much of a broader perspective of who people really are. And you can't get that if you have a company where everyone it kind of looks the same. Everyone enjoys, the same things. That idea of a company, the people that a company is trying to hire being a culture fit, those are issues. That is a problem. Even when I see resume or job descriptions where it says we're looking for a culture fit, I'm like, steer away from that company, because you already know what kind of company it's going to be. What we also know is that gender diverse companies, they are 15% more likely to surpass industry median financial returns. So again, this issue that we're seeing within the cannabis industry, where there is a lack of diversity at a variety of levels, but especially within executive positions, that is something that translates far beyond that both address that impacts the company negatively, but it also impacts the industry negatively too. And so it's in our best interest to ensure that our boards are diverse. The cannabis industry has our boards in cannabis for cannabis businesses. They are less diverse than Fortune 100 tech boards. And that is saying a lot because those boards are not diverse at all. And so much so that California had to make a rule in which you have to have at least, I think it's one person from like a racially diverse background on your board, or you get fined for it. And so to know that our boards are that much worse is sad. It's sad. It's
Definitely. And they're missing out. Brian, I was wondering if maybe you could share some anecdote or little tidbit of times where you've told folks looking for executives, you know, maybe to go for the less on paper candidate and take a chance on somebody that maybe has other skills to offer. I would love to hear something like that to kind of talk about how cannabis provides that unique opportunity to take a chance on folks' varied experience versus looking for that on paper perfect candidate. Because like you said, it's all a startup and all of us are coming to the table with so many traditional skills. So yeah, do you have any little tidbits about that?
Sure. Yeah. And I've known almost since day one coming in the space that as a pale male, I'm in this very, so I don't know a better word that for disliked demographic, but, or not very desirable demographic. You know, I'm completely with Brittany. I mean, the more diverse leadership team you have, the more diverse board you have, the more healthy friction you're going to have, and you're going to be more creative and you're going to be more successful. I think that companies are realizing right now that DEI initiatives can be met in a lot of different ways. I mean, you can hire people that might look the same but have very different backgrounds and sets of experiences, and still build a diverse organization. Since day one we started 5 years ago, I am happy to report that we've almost across the board for every senior search we've had, our client has said, please don't get us another white guy. So going back to 2017, it's been a concerted effort from, you know, we have a number of big MSO clients that you know, are not, you know, beloved in a lot of parts of the industry, but it's been their goal to build very diverse teams and champion more women leaders. So when we go out in a search, we definitely give attention to all qualified applicants, but our active outreach since day one targets more diverse candidates always. But here's the thing, systemically, you have more people that look like me in roles in industries. You have more people that look like me in CFO roles and chief legal officer and so on and so forth. And so, of course, the cannabis industry should own some of the onus for correcting that and give people more chances. But what we've settled on with our clients is we say, okay, we're going to go out and we're not going to start interviewing until we have a completely diverse slate of talents. And we're going to root for a diverse hire. But at the end of the day, we're going to hire the most qualified person. And you have to do that. You have to hire the most qualified person for leader roles in the industry. I can't advise a client and feel good about telling them to hire someone less qualified than someone else because of how they look. Because if you do that and you give an opportunity to a woman or someone else who is not massively abundantly qualified for a role in this industry, then you're doing a disservice not just to the company but to that person.
Let's reel it back a little bit there. That wasn't the suggestion. Sorry if it was. It was more like certain experiences can be different and certain experience, yeah, varies. But let's just hop to the next one. So Savina, in more mature markets, Candidates sometimes have a harder time with less scrupulous operators, even in senior positions where equity and ownership can be on the line. What made you dig into this work at the CWC, and tell us a little bit about the mature market that you guys are in?
Yeah, so we are headquartered in Portland, Oregon. And, you know, we have our legacy of like being one of the leaders on the West Coast of the cannabis industry. But really, we got our start in the fall of 2020 in direct response really to a lot of confusion workers had about their rights during the pandemic. There was a lot of people who wanted to take sick time off. You know, they're really uncomfortable about working on the front lines. And then there was also a lot of retaliation around that. So that led us to build out our website that had just basically a summary of our state's labor rights and what employers can and cannot do. And in addition to that, we created a hotline that workers can reach out to anonymously and share any feelings that they have of feeling unsafe, or that maybe their employer is kind of trampling on those rights.
So how can these lessons be applied before people sign on to a role? Like, what research can they do to find out if a company is ethical? Different tips like that for people.
Yeah, you know, if there is a viable cannabis community in your area, then I would definitely suggest tapping into people's experiences at employers. People have a lot of things to say, especially if they're no longer with that employer. They're no longer afraid of, you know, keeping that job to pay bills. So they're a little more opinionated. I would also suggest checking on Glassdoor. There's actually a lot of really great reviews on there. And even for some smaller operators. And then finally, it's really about trusting your intuition. So if you read a job listing and it doesn't really sound right, or if you're in an interview or even onboarding and you feel maybe pressured to sign something and the document doesn't look right, you know, really listen to your gut and walk away, save yourself the headache.
Definitely. Anything to add there, Brittany?
Not on, well, actually, yes, on this piece, you know, so that what I would suggest to everyone who is listening to this is the Cannabis Workers Coalition. They do amazing work. I have been really familiar with them since I was actually laid off from Leafly, which was my first job in cannabis. And the Cannabis Workers Coalition was absolutely amazing because I learned a whole lot about what my rights were as a worker. So that was really nice. So I just want to give you all a shout out, and everything that you're saying is so on point. One thing that I would like to go back to is as we were talking about recruiting diverse candidates and what those groups of folks in hiring positions, what they may be focusing on right now. One thing that I do want to add is that when we talk about white men, when we talk about white people, it is not a matter of white people or white men being undesirable. That is not the case at all. White people and white men are overrepresented in in the cannabis space. It is not a situation where we're dealing with just a population as a whole, all of the people in the world, and saying that white people or white men are more qualified than everyone else or anyone else, because that's not true. And I know I've come from the tech space. I was actually a elementary teacher, as I mentioned before, and then I transitioned into Fortune 100 tech. And then from there, I entered into cannabis tech and entered into the cannabis industry where I am now. And so I have sat through many HR meetings where there has been a conversation around, we are not going to hire someone that is less qualified. When we talk about hiring diverse people and diverse people gender-wise, when we talk about it racially, when we talk about it culturally, it is not a situation where people who are not white or people who are not white men are less qualified. That is not the case at all. And that is something that has to be dropped across the board. The thing about it, I think when it comes to recruiting in particular and things that organizations can do to ensure that their hiring pool is diverse with people who are equally qualified for the position that we're going for, is to look at spaces where there are diverse people. If you are recruiting, I used to work for Microsoft. And if we are saying that all of our recruiters are going to the same universities to recruit, they're looking at the exact same organizations to recruit people, then you are going to get the exact same people every single time. You're going to get very similar people. You are going to continue to recruit in spaces where people are similar in a lot of ways, but the same barriers that you're experiencing as a recruiter or as a hiring team is already there. It's already in place. It's already happening in those spaces too. And so recruiters and hiring teams, they should always be looking at HBCUs. Those are historically Black colleges. Historically Black colleges put out some of the most Black executives in our entire, just in the history of jobs, in Fortune 500 jobs. We should be looking at fraternities and sororities that are diverse, that are that are racially focused or diverse. We should be looking at fraternities and sororities that are from various communities, that center around various communities. There are Filipino fraternities and sororities. There are Black historical fraternities and sororities. There are Hispanic fraternities and sororities. There are places, there are organizations throughout our entire world, our entire country, that are focused on executives from diverse backgrounds. So when it comes to the piece around who is more qualified and who isn't, we need to let go of the narrative that if you are not white, or that white people or white men are just inherently more qualified. That's not the case. People have to look harder. People have to do their research in order to find their right candidates, because we're out here. We've been out here the entire time. And there are places where we are just not given the same opportunities, even though we are more than qualified for them. So just because someone has never been a VP of marketing, it doesn't mean that that exact same person hasn't been doing every single thing that a VP of marketing would be doing or should be doing or has been doing. It also doesn't mean that they don't have the results either. So I think when it comes to hiring across the board, people have to do better. These teams have to do better. Organizations have to do better, because it is out there. We are out there, and we've been out there. That's all I wanted to put.
No, thank you, Brittany. That was more what I wanted to touch on was, sorry, transferable skills. So maybe if we can go down the line and everyone can talk about some skills from other industries that people can use in cannabis, I think that would be really helpful to the attendees. And that will also give operators some tips on what those transferable skills are to look for and what people can make sure to focus on in interviews and on their resume. So do you want to start that one off, Brittany?
Yeah, so I think one thing is when we think about transferable skills, any role that someone is doing outside of the cannabis industry, people within the cannabis industry, companies within the cannabis industry still need those skills. So if you are a writer, if you are creative in some way, if you are a data scientist, if you have a lot of skills in project management, program management, those sorts of things, most cannabis companies need those exact same skills. So those things can be easily transferable. I would say that people who are thinking about pivoting into the cannabis industry and they have a skill set, but they may not know a whole heck of a lot about the cannabis industry as a whole. I think it is to their benefit to do as much research, try to get as involved as possible within the cannabis industry. There's a lot of different organizations that are already out there. A few that I think of are Women Grow. That's a really good one. We also have the Cannabis Workers Coalition, where they have a wonderful Instagram page where you can learn about some of the issues that people may be dealing with. But then also other organizations like, I think of Women's in Cannabis. That's an organization that they do a lot of work around people who are entrepreneurs, but also people who are looking to transition into the cannabis industry. So there's a lot of organizations out there that you can learn through. And so I think that that's one really good, I guess, way to pivot or a way that you can both take the skills that you have and marry them with with this industry in particular that you want to be in. The other thing that I would say is that something that's very unique about the cannabis industry is that it can be harder to break in to, I would say, it can be harder to break into the cannabis industry from like a social perspective, or even from a cannabis like culture perspective. And part of that is because you have a lot of people who have businesses and they've been in the cannabis industry for a long time. You have people who have come from who are not coming from MSOs, who are coming from the, what do we want to call it? The legacy industry prior to cannabis being legal. And so they also want those, when you're looking at jobs with companies who they originated in the gray market of cannabis, it's really important that you're able to build trust with them and you're able to let them know and demonstrate that you truly, truly, truly have a respect for both the plant, for the people behind the plant, for the people who have really sacrificed in order to bring us the industry that we have now. So those things, I would say, really keep that in mind, because a lot of jobs that you may find on LinkedIn or Indeed or other places, they may not be MSO jobs. In MSO, you get a lot more people who come from corporate, who may not have a lot of experience with the cannabis industry at all. Some people I've worked with, cannabis companies who are like this, where they don't necessarily care about the plant or use the plant. They kind of see it as just another industry as anything else. And so when you're looking at companies that are not like that, just keep in mind that trust is a really big deal. And you being able and you respecting cannabis culture, but also the people who have come before us that make it so that we can have this conversation openly and legal isn't breathing down anybody's neck. You really have to show that you have respect for that and understanding of it.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's so true. Like, we're even able to just have this conversation and talk about all the job opportunities, and it's really wonderful. Brian, I was hoping you could touch on what are some of those transferable skills that companies are looking for in maybe non-cannabis folks?
Well, we've established that any functional skill is desired. Doesn't matter what you've done in any industry. From a functional discipline standpoint, it's needed in cannabis. You just have to find out where that's needed and who needs it. After that, I would just say that experience starting something up, building something, being a part of turning something around, tearing it down and rebuilding it. Just, there's not a lot of room in this industry for, and when I speak about this is speaking from hiring leaders and, not, recruiting straight from universities and whatnot, right? So this is like, so I'm speaking about people that have had opportunities to be a builder leader, because there's nothing in maintenance mode in this industry. So to demonstrate that you're not a maintenance leader, because it might be attractive to, speaking to hiring companies now in cannabis, to say, well, he or she has this great pedigree. We want to hire this person that's worked at this Fortune 50 or 100 or whatever company for all these years, and look how they've climbed the ranks. Isn't that fantastic? But in a lot of these big companies, the assignment really is just don't screw it up, right? Just maintain this thing that's set in this set construct. So the experience you would want to demonstrate as a qualified leader to come in cannabis is being a part of building, creating, moving around, changing companies, changing industry verticals, showing that you can adapt and pivot a lot and succeed across different sets of systems and cultures and whatnot. So that at a high level is what we look for, is people that have worked in a lot of different environments, a lot of different size companies, and started things up and built them.
Danielle, you're muted.
Somewhat attached to that, Savina, can you tell us some more about what operators and owners can do to retain employees long-term, so they never have to, not never, but so that they can reduce the frequency with which they're doing their job searches, and companies can reduce the frequency of the job searches as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have started doing a little bit more technical assistance with very, very small business owners. And the number one thing I always tell them is to focus on non-monetary incentives, because really there's a whole bunch that you can offer to your employee without having to, you know, add that into your expenses. So for example, one of the biggest ones are probably like a non-traditional schedule. So you'll see that as like 4/10s, 3 days off, or even the opportunity to work remotely. You know, people really value that work-life balance that we see all over social media. You know what I mean? If people can make that a reality in their life, it's really important to them. But at the same time, you know, kind of following what Brittany and Brian were echoing throughout this whole panel is, you know, I can't stress enough basic respect for workers. You know, this looks like praising workers in front of their colleagues or shouting them out on social media, offering to mentor your employee to give them an opportunity to climb up that corporate ladder, or at the very least, just having a genuine interest in what workers have to say. That's probably our number one complaint from workers, is that they feel like upper management or their bosses are talking at them and not really valuing their opinion, their feedback. A lot of times there's not even any sort of downward up channel of communication. And like just having something like that is so valuable to your workers.
Yeah, I would add that I think the most effective leaders in the space go all the extra steps to inspire their team to have their back and be extremely loyal to them, which comes with mentorship, but championship. So going beyond mentoring and championing for your people and promoting people for the right reasons and championing for them to have opportunities to build their career marketability. You can't always move everyone up. So figuring out ways to move people laterally and help them build new skills is also really important for leaders in the space to do for their teams.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add on to what Savina and Brian are saying is that there's both mentorship, but then there's also sponsorship. And when it comes to mentorship, you know, we want, I think, as both leaders and then also workers, that mentorship relationship can be a really wonderful one. I mean, it can be one where you really are guiding someone in order to support them throughout their career or with their career development. And that is always wonderful. We love having mentors, and mentors can be very hard to come by. One thing though, that can really take your employees, their career to the next level is sponsorship. So that is you opening up your network to them and you advocating for their progression. So if you have somebody on, let's say I'm gonna use marketing as an example, but you have a marketing coordinator on your team and you're like, man, just so good, or he's just so great at this, then it's one thing to be their mentor and to help them kind of up level their skills. But it's another thing for you to go maybe to their direct manager or their direct supervisor and say, hey, this person has really been standing up and standing out. And, you know, we're going to be opening a position at some point, whenever. And I think you should really consider them for this. Opening up your network, even if you find that you have an employee who is above and beyond, and you know that there might not be a position within your organization or within your team to take them to the next level, it is so easy to, if you have other people in your network who have open positions or have positions that you feel like that person would just thrive in, and recommending that to, you know, whoever this person is in your network, while also talking to your employee. It sucks to lose an employee, but you're going to lose an employee anyway if there's no way for them to move up within the organization. So find a way to be a sponsor to as many people as you can within your organization as a leader, because that is what makes it so that those same people will do right by you. Like, they're going to bring you opportunities too.
Loyalty and innovation. Yeah, these are all really great points. So I think we've gotten a lot of really great takeaways. We're just going to answer I'm going to toss out some questions that have been submitted to us. And I'm really just going to see who wants to answer them, because they really do vary. So one of them was, what are some strategies for discussing your legacy experience? And before we get too specific, I think sometimes, you know, it's easy to think legacy as plant touching or bud tender, but hey, there's legacy COOs out there, CEOs out there, legacy builders and movers and shakers who have been doing, you know, lots of things. And some of them might eventually, continuously, let's say, not eventually, you know, try to make that move into the regulated industry. So what are some strategies for people, whether they're high level, low level, plant touching, or just want to be involved in some way? What are some strategies for them to discuss their legacy experience? Anyone?
One thing that I would say is know your audience. know your audience. Interestingly enough, as you were saying, Danielle, one of my clients is the largest producer processor here in Washington. They're also in Arizona, and they also are in Thailand as well. They have an organization there too. And interestingly enough, they've been around for 10 years at this point, and they're at this point of acquisition. And the two people who originally started it, they came from legacy. They were out in the field when, you know, cannabis wasn't legal. It wasn't okay to do. It wasn't, there was a lot of risk. And even when I talked to him, when I talked to their co-founding team, it's definitely one where they want people who have legacy background, like, and they'll tell you about it too. And they'll tell you about the things that they had to do, and they'll tell you about their experience. And I think when you run into situations like that, you can be very transparent about what your legacy experience is. And so in the exact same way that you would talk about any other job, you can talk about that one too. And you can probably be a little bit more transparent in those situations. I would say when it comes to organizations, especially when it comes to our MSOs in particular, and other organizations where it's a little bit more, where the people that you're working with and you're talking to and who are interviewing you may have came from some other corporate background that's outside of the cannabis industry. I would just be cautious in the way that I present it. I would say if you just talk about it like you would talk about any other job, and not even talk about the fact that it was, you know, a legacy experience, I think that's a way where you can both show your understanding and show that you know about the industry without like incriminating yourself in a way that may have you in a situation where you're judged negatively for that.
Yeah, I think that's the balance sometimes, is knowing who's open to those conversations and who isn't. Do you have anything to add, Savina or Brian, as far as discussing your legacy experience?
Well, know your audience for sure, and know if it makes sense in the role. We have some clients that years ago were completely against hiring someone with traditional legacy market experience, and they've evolved over for plant touching roles because they understand they need more of that expertise. And but if you were your we'll say head of compliance for that traditional operation, you're probably going to have a more difficult time selling yourself as a head of compliance for big MSO that's trying to meet a certain set of guidelines. So if you were, your head of cultivation or operations, I guess what I'm saying is there's certain traditional skill sets that are more acceptable to more legal operators right now. So it's unfortunately not a blanket thing, because just some things are different now than before. And of course, if you've evolved and taken some continued education and learn some skills along the way as it relates to the legal market since then, parlay those and don't dismiss your traditional market experiences, but accentuate those newer legal market experiences more so.
Gotcha. How about you, Savina? Anything to add about legacy transference and what people, because I know people often think, on the West Coast, there's no still operating legacy stuff, but there is. And, people I've seen people pop in and out of regulated and legacy back and forth a few times. Got anything to add there?
I mean, other than, piggybacking off what Brittany and Brian are saying, is stick to the skills. At the end of the day, it was a job. You did things, whether it was, communications or managing relationships, kind of being able to pull that thread of that professional language out of the actual experience that you had is, very valuable.
That's a perfect seg into the next question, which was, what are some strategies for people that are maybe reworking their resume for specific opportunities? So not so much jumping into cannabis but really just anybody that's looking to move up in cannabis. Like, what are some skills for them to work on that resume? Do you want to take that first, Savina?
Okay, I guess I would just be kind of reiterating what I said. So
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. It's
Brian,
just,
you want to jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Add a lot of quantifiable measurements of success. I don't think it's difficult to move around laterally in the industry. We're squarely in an incestuous hiring type of situation where experience in the industry is highly desired over hiring someone from outside. So the key to separate yourself from the competition to move around in the industry is put those quantifiables on, which I know can be difficult because we're in a space where a lot of companies, like we've discussed before, are lacking with a lot of real KPIs and metrics in place, or they don't let their people talk about revenues and other figures. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, but to the best you can, update your resume with numbers. We'll just say that. It's just you have to quantify your successes, and that could be for anything. Again, a little bit tough in social media, but like we were talking, quantify the increase in followers, or so we can go on and on. But there are quantifiable measurements of success in any role, and you have to challenge yourself to put those in your resume.
Brittany, anything to add there on resume strategies?
Yeah, one of the kind of formats that I suggest people follow when they're describing what they did, and this goes into what Brian is saying about quantifiables and that being attractive on resumes. It is very important. And so the formula that I usually suggest to people is like problem, solution, results, or project, what you were supposed to be doing, and then your results. And so if you can show the impact that you made, that's what a lot of people are looking for. That's what a lot of hiring managers are looking for. That's what I look for when I'm hiring people onto my teams, is like, I want to see your impact. And so many things that we do, especially within the areas that I work within. Sales is one where, hey, you should have some numbers there. But when it comes to some positions in marketing, when it comes to some positions in PR, it is very, very difficult to have numbers attached to that, especially when it's PR, because there's not a lot of tracking in that way that exists, tracking technology that is. And so if you can just show your impact, like this was the result of what I did, and this is the impact that it had on the organization, had on the client, had on the whoever, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, that all sounds like great takeaways. So now this one might seem like an employee question, and this is probably going to be our very last question of the day. So I just also want to thank you all so much for this conversation. How often should people expect a raise and or performance review? Because I think that this metric might be different in cannabis and all of us might have different experiences, but I think that this question makes a difference, both to decide when to maybe move on to an opportunity. And I think that if operators pay attention to these answers, they might get a little insight into retaining employees. So yeah, who wants to take that one?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in first on behalf of what we hear from our workers, which is just, like a quarterly review, that like just standard every quarter review of what they're doing good, what could be improved. And in that also includes some sort of scheduled raises, or at least some sort of plan on when are we going to be getting into that scheduled raise.
Great
Savina,
tip.
that is great suggestions. One piece, again, like Savina said, review, like having scheduled reviews within the year so that people know how they're performing. And then I think a yearly raise makes a lot of sense. With that being said, for the workers who are listening to this, and for I guess the employers too, you can always ask for a raise. You can always ask for a raise. You can always ask for more money. Some areas where when you know that you should ask for a raise is if your responsibilities have expanded in some way. You need to ask for a raise. Am I getting paid more to do this? Or am I just keeping the same job title and you're just putting more things on my plate that are out of my scope? So that's one time where you should ask for a raise. You should also ask for a raise anytime you are given a title change. So if you are given a title change, unless you're moving down, which is usually not the case, you should ask for more money. You can also negotiate so many things. So you can negotiate your bonuses. I know even when I worked in tech, I negotiated every single bonus I got. I appreciate the bonus. I love it. For us, like we got them bi-yearly.
Hot tip, everybody.
Yeah, but like I negotiated every single bonus and I almost always got more. Nice. I always, even if I was asking for promotion or I was asking for a change to my compensation, I always negotiated that too. You bring me an offer, okay, well, we're going to negotiate it a bit. And that's okay. You can do those things. You can also negotiate other things. Mm-hmm. So I've asked for everything from transportation. So here in Seattle, like public transportation, the train and the bus, we have like little cards that you get. So like negotiated for that. You can negotiate for more time off. You can negotiate for like certain time off if maybe you all have like blackout dates where no one can take time off at all. If you're coming into a job, you can always ask for those sorts of things. There's a lot of things that you can negotiate out there.
Awesome. Yeah, there's some tips in there that I'm definitely going to take. Brian, any tips to leave us off with before we have Sarah sign us off for the day?
I'm good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you everyone so much for participating. Sarah, you want to give us our little sign off?
Sure. As Danielle said, thank you to the panelists. Thank you to our attendees. Just as a reminder, this replay will be available on a replays page within a week. There's also a poll that popped up. We'd appreciate your feedback. And just a couple of reminders, we have Arcview live in Miami, December 7th through 9th, and 2.5 days packed full of content and programs and lots of cannabis. So we'd love to see you there. And then if you're headed to Vegas next week for Cannabis Week, the Arcview Women's Inclusion Network is hosting a canna-ladies lounge at the Flower Hire After Party on Thursday, November 17th. So we hope to see you there. And that's a wrap. I hope that you got value from the program today. And thank you again for coming, and enjoy your weekend. And we'll see you next time here on Arcview Access. Thanks, everyone.